Somewhere out past Neptune, moving faster than a bullet, there's a machine older than most of the people reading this sentence, and it is still talking to us. 49 years into a mission built to last 4, Voyager 1 is now so far away that if you shouted at it right now, your voice, traveling at the speed of light, would not arrive for 23 hours. It carries a golden record etched with the sound of human laughter, whale song, and a greeting in 55 languages. A message built for someone or something that was never supposed to find it. But what if something did? What if, instead of drifting forever through the black, Voyager 1 hit something solid, a surface, a gravity well, an alien world with its own rules? What happens in the seconds after humanity's most famous machine stops floating and starts crashing? To understand why that question is so unsettling, you have to understand what Voyager 1 actually is right now, today, in this exact moment. It is not a relic. It is not dead metal drifting in silence. As of 2026, Voyager 1 is roughly 25.5 billion kilometers from Earth, about 170 times the distance between Earth and the Sun, and it is still transmitting, still listening, still somehow alive. In November of this year, it will cross a threshold no human-built object has ever reached, one light day from home. That means a command sent from Mission Control on a Monday will not reach the spacecraft until Tuesday, and if Voyager answers, that reply will not land back on Earth until Wednesday. 2 full days just to say hello and hear a response. Read that again. We built something so far away that conversation with it no longer happens in real time. It happens across days. And here is where the story gets strange, because Voyager 1 was never designed to be a message in a bottle floating for eternity. It was designed to visit Jupiter and Saturn, take its pictures, and finish its job within 4 years. That job ended in November 1980. Everything since then, every year, every data packet, every quiet transmission crossing the void, has been bonus time, unplanned, unscripted. NASA engineers who worked on the original launch have retired, some have died, and the spacecraft they built is still calling home, powered by a chunk of decaying plutonium that loses about 4 watts of energy every single year. Think about what that means. Every year the light gets a little dimmer. Every year engineers on Earth have to make a brutal decision, this is not a machine coasting peacefully into retirement. This is a machine being kept alive piece by people who refuse to let it die. And it is moving the entire time. 17 kilometers every single second, roughly 60,000 kilometers an hour, hurtling through a region of space so empty and so alien that comparing it to anything on Earth barely makes sense. Voyager 1 crossed the heliopause back in 2012, the invisible. But here's where it gets worse. In all that immensity, in all that emptiness, Voyager 1 is not actually heading toward anything. It has no destination, no target. It is simply moving outward along the trajectory it was given during its Saturn flyby in 1980, drifting through the gap between stars, the way a stone thrown into the ocean keeps sinking long after the hand that threw it is gone. According to current trajectory calculations, Voyager 1 will not have a close encounter with another star system for approximately 40,000 years, when it passes within roughly 1.6 light years of a dim star called Gliese 445, 40,000 years. For context, that is longer than the entire span of recorded human civilization, repeated more than 8 times over. And even then, close encounter in cosmic terms still means a distance so vast it barely counts as an encounter at all. So when we ask the question, what if Voyager 1 crashed on an alien planet? We are not asking about something NASA expects to happen. We are asking about a scenario built entirely outside the spacecraft's real trajectory, a deliberate thought experiment. What would actually occur if fate, or physics, or something we don't yet understand, redirected this 49-year-old machine into the gravity of a world it was never meant to reach? And once you start pulling that thread, the implications go somewhere far darker and far more fascinating than most people expect. Let's start with the physics, because the physics alone should terrify you. Voyager 1 is currently moving at roughly 17 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. That is not a landing speed. That is not even close to a landing speed. For comparison, spacecraft attempting a controlled landing on a planetary surface, the way the Perseverance rover touched down on Mars, go through an elaborate, meticulously engineered descent sequence involving heat shields, parachutes, retro rockets, and sky cranes, all designed to shed velocity gradually so that the machine survives contact with the ground. Voyager 1 has none of that. No heat shield, no parachute, no descent engine. It was built to fly past planets, not to touch them. If Voyager 1 ever encountered a solid planetary surface at anything close to its current velocity, the result would not be a landing. It would be an impact violent enough to vaporize most of the spacecraft on contact, converting decades of engineering into a spray of molten metal and debris in a fraction of a second. But here's where the story shifts, because a real crash scenario is not that simple, and simplicity is exactly what most explanations get wrong. If Voyager 1 were somehow captured by the gravity of an alien planet, pulled in by a massive world slowed by an atmosphere, dragged down over time, the outcome would depend entirely on what kind of world it hit. And this is the part almost nobody thinking about this question actually considers. Think about what that means for a machine that has already survived 49 years of cosmic radiation, extreme temperature swings, and the crushing vacuum of interstellar space. Voyager 1 is tougher than people assume. Its outer hull, its instrument housings, its radioisotope generator casing, these were engineered to endure conditions most human technology never has to face. If it struck a thin, wispy atmosphere and skimmed rather than plunged, some fragments might survive an impact that would have obliterated a fragile spacecraft. If it struck a gas giant with no solid surface at all, it would simply be swallowed, crushed slowly by increasing atmospheric pressure as it sank deeper and deeper into a world with no bottom, its transmissions cutting out mid-signal, its final data packet arriving on Earth 23 hours after the spacecraft itself had already ceased to exist. Read that again. In this scenario, humanity would keep receiving messages from a machine that had already died a full day earlier. We would be listening to a ghost and not know it yet. And this is where the real weight of the story sets in, because Voyager 1 is not carrying empty instruments. It is carrying a message. Bolted to its side is the Golden Record, a 12-inch gold-plated copper disc containing greetings in 55 human languages, images of Earth, mathematical diagrams explaining our solar system, and recordings of natural sounds, wind, thunder, whale calls, alongside 90 minutes of music, spanning cultures and centuries. It was designed by a committee led by Carl Sagan specifically for a scenario almost nobody expected to actually happen, an encounter with an intelligence that was not human. The record includes instructions etched directly into its cover, describing how to play it using diagrams. A scientifically literate species would theoretically be able to decode without any shared language at all. For nearly 50 years, that record has been floating through space as a message with no confirmed recipient, a bottle thrown into an ocean so large it may never wash up on any shore. And here is the unsettling twist. If Voyager 1 crashed on an alien planet inhabited by something capable of finding it, examining it, and decoding it, the Golden Record would no longer be a symbolic gesture drifting through the void. It would become the very first piece of physical human civilization ever encountered by another form of intelligence. Not a radio signal, not a flicker of light from a distant telescope. An actual object, built by human hands, carrying human voices, sitting in the wreckage on a world we've never seen. Think about what that means for a moment, because the scale of it is almost impossible to hold in your head all at once. Every choice made by the scientists who assembled that record, every song selected, every greeting recorded, every image chosen to represent who we are, was made by people trying to summarize an entire species, an entire history, an entire planet's worth of culture and conflict and beauty, onto a single disc small enough to hold in two hands. If an alien intelligence recovered that wreckage, the first thing they would learn about humanity would not be our wars, our politics, our mistakes. It would be a curated, deliberate first impression, assembled decades before that civilization even existed. And this is where it gets worse, because the record was designed with an assumption baked directly into it. The assumption that whoever found it would have both the technology and the patience to decode encoded diagrams, interpret analog audio grooves, and reconstruct meaning from a format that, even on Earth, most people alive today have never actually used. What if the species that found it lacked eyes as we understand them? What if they perceived the universe through vibration, or magnetism, or something entirely outside human sensory experience? The record assumes a kind of intelligence remarkably similar to our own. If it landed in front of something too different from us, it might never be understood at all. An entire species' introduction to the cosmos, sitting silently in alien dust, unread and unreadable. And this is where the story turns from a thought experiment about physics into something closer to a mirror held up to ourselves. Because the deeper question buried inside, what if Voyager 1 crashed on an alien planet, is not really about the spacecraft at all. It's about what its discovery would say about the odds we've been quietly living with our entire lives. According to current estimates, our galaxy alone contains somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. And modern exoplanet surveys suggest that most of those stars host at least one planet. That means the Milky Way alone may contain hundreds of billions of worlds, and Voyager 1, in its entire 49-year, 25 billion kilometer journey, has covered a distance so small compared to the scale of the galaxy that it becomes almost embarrassing to say out loud. Even after traveling for nearly half a century, Voyager 1, X1 has crossed roughly 0.0227% of the distance to Proxima Centauri, the nearest star system to our own. Let that sink in. Nearly 50 years of travel, and the spacecraft has barely begun to leave our galactic backyard. The idea that it might stumble into a planet with intelligent life capable of recovering and interpreting its wreckage is, by any reasonable calculation, staggeringly unlikely. But here's where it gets worse, and also, strangely, more beautiful. Unlikely is not impossible. And the entire history of scientific discovery is a graveyard of things once dismissed as impossible. So let's push the thought experiment further, because a genuine intelligence briefing on this scenario cannot stop at the moment of impact. It has to ask what happens next. If Voyager 1's wreckage were recovered by a species capable of spaceflight, a civilization advanced enough to detect an object entering their planetary system, track its trajectory, and retrieve its remains before erosion or geological activity buried it, that alone would tell us something enormous. It would tell us we are not the only technological civilization this galaxy has produced, and that single fact, confirmed by nothing more than scorched metal and a gold-plated record, would represent the most significant discovery in the history of our species, discovered not by us, but about us, by someone else, light years away, sifting through the wreckage of our own ambition. But consider the darker possibility, the one most people don't want to think about. What if the intelligence that found Voyager 1's wreckage was not scientifically curious, but strategically cautious? What if, instead of celebrating first contact, they treated the crash the way any advanced civilization concerned with its own survival might treat an unidentified object falling from their sky? As a potential threat first, and a curiosity second? The golden record contains our exact location relative to 14 pulsars, a kind of cosmic address system devised by Sagan's team, specifically so that any species capable of understanding the pulsar map could trace the object back to its origin star. This was always the record's most debated feature. Some scientists at the time worried that broadcasting our address to the universe was less like sending a friendly letter and more like leaving your front door unlocked with a note taped to it. If Voyager 1 crashed and was recovered by a civilization with more advanced technology than our own and less benevolent intentions than we'd hope, the wreckage would not just be a curiosity, it would be a map. This is not chaos. This is the exact scenario physicist Stephen Hawking warned about when he cautioned that broadcasting our existence to the cosmos before understanding who might be listening could be one of the most consequential risks humanity has ever taken and never fully debated. And here's where the story escalates one more time, because the scenario doesn't require an alien civilization at all to be unsettling. What if Voyager 1 crashed on a planet with no intelligent life whatsoever? A barren world, a rocky moon, a gas giant with nothing living in its clouds, and simply became debris? In that version of events, the most important artifact humanity ever built to represent itself to the universe would end its story not in triumph, not in discovery, but in silence. No one to read the record. No one to hear the whale songs or the greetings in 55 languages. Just wreckage, slowly buried under dust or sinking into pressure so extreme it would eventually crush even Voyager's hardened casing into something unrecognizable, and Earth would never know. That's the detail that makes this scenario genuinely haunting rather than simply speculative. Because Voyager 1 is so far away and its signal takes so long to arrive, the moment of any crash, real or hypothetical, would not announce itself. There would be no dramatic final transmission, no distress call, no cinematic countdown. There would simply, one day, be silence. Engineers at NASA's Deep Space Network would send a routine command, and no response would come back. And they would not immediately know why. Equipment failure, power depletion, a misaligned antenna, or catastrophic impact with an alien world. From 25 billion kilometers away, all four of those explanations look identical. Nothing. This is, in fact, closer to how Voyager 1's story might actually end, according to the engineers managing it today. NASA's own projections suggest that the spacecraft's radioisotope power source will likely become insufficient to operate even its remaining instruments sometime between 2025 and 2030. When that happens, Voyager 1 will not crash into anything. It will simply go quiet, its transmitter falling silent forever, its trajectory continuing outward, unchanged forever, a cold and lifeless machine drifting through the galaxy for millions of years after every person who ever worked on it, and every person reading this sentence right now, is gone. According to informed estimates from mission scientists, Voyager 1's structural body, separate from its now defunct power and communication systems, could remain physically intact, tumbling silently through interstellar space for hundreds of millions of years, possibly longer than any other trace of human civilization survives anywhere in the universe. Long after Earth's cities crumble, long after our records and monuments erode into dust, Voyager 1 may still be out there, unpowered, unresponsive, but whole. A silent monument outlasting the species that built it. What most people are not seeing when they ask a question like, what if Voyager 1 crashed on an alien planet, is that they are really asking a much older and much heavier question dressed up in the language of science fiction. What happens to the things we leave behind after we're gone? Voyager 1 was built by people who understood something. The rest of us rarely sit with directly. That they were constructing an object with a life expectancy longer than human civilization itself. Every decision, from the choice of gold plating to resist corrosion, to the selection of sounds meant to represent the entirety of human experience, was made with the understanding that this machine might be the only piece of us that survives long enough and travels far enough to ever be found by anyone or anything else. And that is the real story the crash scenario forces us to confront. Not the physics of impact velocity, not the odds of encountering intelligent life, but the strange, quiet responsibility of being the species that sent something like this out into the dark in the first place. We built a time capsule and launched it without a return address that mattered, without any certainty it would ever be found, without any guarantee we would still exist by the time, if ever, someone opened it. The real story is that Voyager 1 was never really a scientific instrument first. It was a message wrapped inside a scientific instrument sent by a civilization that, in 1977, had barely stepped foot on its own moon, gambling that someday, somewhere, someone would care enough to listen. So where does that leave us now, in 2026, as Voyager 1 approaches its one light day milestone, still transmitting, still alive, still carrying that golden record through a darkness so vast that the word vast barely does it justice? It leaves us with a machine slipping further from our reach every single second, its power dwindling, its instruments going dark one by one, moving toward a horizon it will never actually reach in any time frame that matters to us. It leaves us wondering whether the scenario we just walked through, a crash, a discovery, a message finally read by someone other than us, will ever actually happen, or whether Voyager 1 is destined to drift forever, unread, unheard, a letter that never finds its recipient. And it leaves us with the uncomfortable truth that we may never know the answer. If Voyager 1 does eventually collide with something out there, in some star system we can't even name yet, in some era of history none of us will live to see, Earth will not be watching. There will be no signal. There will be no confirmation. There will only be the last known trajectory of a 49-year-old spacecraft, still logged in NASA's archives, quietly extrapolated forward into a future no one can verify. Is there something out there right now, in the vast dark between the stars, close enough to that trajectory to ever cross paths with a dying machine carrying humanity's first and only introduction to the universe? Or is Voyager 1 destined to travel forever, alone, its golden record spinning uselessly in the silence, a message with no one left to read it and no one left to send it? We built the only thing that might answer that question for us, and then we sent it so far away that we will almost certainly never learn what happens to it at all.